All right, so I started the show just a little bit early. I'm not really here yet, guys. And two, one, and hi, welcome to the ComicBase live stream. Another perfect opening. Anyway, hi everyone. I'm Pete Bickford. I'm the guy who does ComicBase and a few other things, and I'm have our moderator in the house, Mr. Greg Heck. Thank you all for joining us here. We're so glad you all could make it. And today we'll be talking about a couple of ComicBase things, a little bit of news. We'll be getting into the wonderful world of data and data submissions. We'll be talking about the ways that you should and shouldn't be tracking certain things in ComicBase that people have sent me special questions in. Ironically, it's been kind of a week for that this week, so we're going to hit as much of that as we possibly can. And then you will have my actual summer movie reviews. We had these, for those of you who tried to catch last week's live stream, we had the summer movie preview. And now I've actually gone courtesy of an AMC Movie Pass, which I think they're now calling Prime, Stubbs Prime or something like that. But basically it comes down to pay 26, 27 bucks a month and you can see up to 4 movies a week. And since there were enough movies coming out this summer that I was interested in, I figured out the break even for me is something like 5 movies. And I thought, well, okay, I can easily do that within the course of the 3-month commitment that you have to do to get these tickets. And so ever since I got the passes, I've been seeing movies like a crazy person, and I'll be telling you all about about some of the things we saw there, including my reviews of well, at least 3 of the ones we talked about last week. So anyway, thanks everyone for making it here. I want to say hi first. Oro Viejo is in the house here from Minneapolis. It looks like interesting weather as always out there. Agent at Camp out here from Florida, where it is as always hot, summery, and muggy. And yes, thank you for for inquiring about how's the equipment check going, because Greg Hecht was indeed in the house here, and the equipment's checking out okay. Uh, he says, Agent Camp, are you trying to get the show booted off the air for a second week in a row? No. And by the way, in case you guys were wondering about that, I will not be playing any movie trailers today. I've learned my lesson. I actually told myself a story, about why it is I wasn't doing summer movies, because I did one about 4 or 5 years ago. I spent a lot of time, looking at all the upcoming releases, kind of timing them with, our promotional scheduling, comics and things like that, finding the trailers, cutting them down, getting them transcribed to my gear here so they could be played on command, writing notes about what was going to be good, bad, and indifferent about each of the things. There are enormous amounts of work doing these summer trailer movies, but I love seeing trailers, so I like doing it. And I thought for the years since then that the reason I wasn't doing it was because I just didn't have the time. It takes like basically most of a day to get the show ready if you're doing trailers. But then I'd forgotten the other reason that I had stopped doing trailers, on the show, and that is because apparently there's an AI bot running it, at YouTube Central that's looking for copyrighted content like, oh, I don't know, movie trailers, and will literally shut down your live stream in mid-sentence. I thought, well, they'll copyright strike me maybe afterwards, but I'm not making any money off the channel anyway, so what do I care? But no, I do care about whether or not you can hear my words as I'm speaking, so that's a consideration. So probably no more trailer shows from me. You might see still frames, but that's about it. But anyway, let's see here. Larry Harry Higgs says hot and muggy here in eastern North Carolina, and I think we're pretty much all in the house here, so let's get on with the news here. I think we've hit everyone else here. But anyway, thank you all for joining me on this lovely summer day. I just got back from seeing Masters of the Universe like 15 minutes before showtime. And so I will have thoughts on that one. I'm going to save that one for the very end of the show because I have the most thoughts on it. And we'll tell you if that's any worth doing or not. And then the other thing, of course, I'm reeling from in my own personal life today is my beloved coffee maker 13 years, gave up the ghost the other day. The Juro Impressa C5, But anyway, it developed a GFCI fault. If any of you guys know much about troubleshooting those, let me know. In the meantime, because caffeine is kind of my life, I immediately had to go and spring for like, the $1 Ninja espresso maker that had just been released like 3 days earlier. And at some point, maybe I'll do a coffee review channel on that one, because that's a piece of gear, that one. It's probably about as complicated as my video switcher. But anyway, so but everyone who worried about my state of caffeination, nope, you need not worry. It's all sorted. We're good. And if I ever repair the Impressa, maybe I'll have a backup caffeine induction system just in case that one goes down, because it's important. All right, so On ComicBase news, ComicBase 2026 version 26.2.2 is officially released. Wow! So, Bickford, you're asking me to get excited about not just a point release, but a point release? Indeed, you will be. Yes, it's the official version of kind of the patch up of ComicBase 26, second quarter release, or yeah, third, fourth, whatever quarter the heck we're in. But anyway, we introduced a ton of new features in the whole thing and a whole bunch of optimizations in ComicBase 2026. And there were a couple is when it got enough wider release, there were a couple of squirrely issues that sort of surfaced, very machine specific, user database specific, that just caused things to be just a little bit, and we'd largely road tested and fixed most of these over the last couple of weeks. We put it into official release date because we managed to actually find in Deep Six the last little twitchy paint redraw issue that was driving me crazy. Thank you to the folks who sent in screenshots of that happening on their machine. It helped me locate what was going on with that. But that is actually out there now. Do check that out. The most egregious one that it fixed probably didn't happen to you if you're a regular viewer of the channel, because you probably updated your comic base at the 26.2 series 6 months ago. But there was, if you're coming in from a very old version of comic base, depending on how buff your machine was, and this was really literally one of those things that only happens under certain circumstances based on like your processor's power and things like that, you could actually get into a position where, as it's converting your database to run with the new software, it did a whole bunch of new tune-ups to the database to make things faster, and also to work with the new tags that we put in. But as part of that, we realized, oh yeah, we also made a change to the alphabetization algorithm to handle a few things better. And so we better run and alphabetize on people's titles if you're coming in from the older versions. And if all that stuff happens all in a row and the alphabetization hits you right at the end and your processor is not particularly buff, it actually could kind of choke out the user interface process that was running to update the progress bar. So it actually would get done with the job. It's just it would never tell you it was done with the job, and so you'd sit there with the progress bar on your screen forever, which is really strange and very frustrating. But we did find that, and we did fix that one up. So if you have the latest version, that should never happen to you. And my apologies for anyone it ever did happen to, but the people responsible have been sacked, and we hired a whole new programming team, and so we'll try not to have that happen again. Anyway, other things that have happened, we fixed a display issue if there were no tags on the title that you started up with. So typically there's a list of little pills. Let me show you on the demo machine over here. So if you see those little tags here on the Aliens portfolio, if I wave the mouse over there we go. You see the Aliens portfolio is Aliens, it's licensed, it's a pinup art book, it's also science fiction. These they're called pills. If you started up your database on a title that for whatever reason had no tags associated with it, the description would rise up to fill the space. And because it was kind of leaving room for a pill to be drawn there on a later date, you would see the first part of your description would be overwritten by a blank space partially. It was very vexing, especially because it never, ever, ever happened to anyone we did here, because 99+% of all the titles in ComicBase have tags on them, and we were just never the guys who ever started up with one that didn't have one, so it was hard to find. But we did find that one, so that's good. We fixed a small bug involving searching across media types. So if you were looking at, say, books, and you said, I now want to search my comic books for certain things, thanks to Steve Dazinger for helping us locate that problem. We got that one squished out pretty quickly. And some other things that helped us. We have some fixes on the software that we use to inside ComicBase to help us with processing corrections, tags, and so forth. So it makes our editors happier. Probably doesn't affect you guys at all. Actually, I know it doesn't affect you guys at all. But anyway, that is in there. So that is all part of ComicBase 26.2.2. Download it now wherever fine software is sold, or in this case, under the internet menus, check for updates. Yeah, you can tell I've had my coffee this morning. Okay, the update for the week is coming out tomorrow. I have about another 2-3 inches full of comic books to get through on my indexing, and then we will be in a position to push that one. We're also expecting Penguin Random House stuff to drop up here, so that'll move the pile stack up slightly, but we'll take it from there. And then you should have everything for the week, and you should be good to go. And then, with no further ado, I think I want to say hi to Ed and everyone, but let's get on with information about data submissions. And let me go ahead and switch over to the demo computer, put myself in the frame here, and we'll talk about things that people send me. I'm not going to name names because I didn't ask if I could use his name on the air, but got a really good note the other day from a guy saying, "Hey, I don't want to be one of those guys," because I'd mentioned that. One of the things that we're doing on the back end here is we're trying to find ways to make the handling of corrections more efficient for our team, because obviously you guys send us a ton of data, we edit a ton of data, and making that as efficiently as humanly possible, a strong thing that we very interested in doing, because it's not the funnest part of anyone's week around here, and there sure is a lot of data. You probably see on a typical week we'll handle thousands, if not tens of thousands of submissions for new and corrected data. We'll push price updates and everything else like that, and it's an everlasting stream. I think at one point we were running a daily rate of something around 4,000 or 5,000 corrections per day that our team has to get through. So obviously we're very interested in making these as good as possible. One of the things that we started doing is we started keeping very detailed track of who sent what in, and not just having kind of the shared knowledge on the staff here about, hey, who's really good with this kind of data, who's really good with other kinds of data, because we do actually have kind of a sliding scale for who we believe in case of certain things. I mean, we have users who are absolutely freaking amazing about sending in cover variant stuff, perfectly formatted exactly the way we want to see it, fits the spec that we use for submitting these things wonderful. And other people that we like you a lot as human beings, and that's not your forte, or fort, as my mom would say, because she thinks that we're speaking French and it's really Italian, but that's okay. Anyway, the guy who said, "Yeah, hey, I saw that you're keeping track on these things, and I don't want to be one of those guys," because one of the things with the system scoring is we kind of can see now who's got, with regard to each field on the form, who has what kind of record about what we would take and not take from them in the past. And that kind of forms the basis for, well, this guy is disagreeing with us on this field, and how do we feel about that? What's our confidence level about taking his correction? It does dial into our judgment. And we're trying to make this a bit more scientific than just beforehand. We just had, kind of like the shared knowledge of everyone who'd ever edited corrections before, and say, well, is this guy good at this sort of thing or not? So anyway, we're trying to get a little faster about that. And so this guy said, hey, can you give us some explicit rules about what sorts of things go where, so we're not just sort of shotgunning the whole thing at you, and that you don't, essentially, I don't want to be one of those guys that you're either rejecting out of hand, or that you wind up editing a lot, which almost is worse for us. If we have to edit your correction a lot in order to take it, that is actually probably the most time-consuming thing we can do when handling that one. So I thought, yeah, a great idea. Let's go ahead and go through a show, and where we talk about the ins and outs of some of the big fields, and talk about what makes for good data versus bad data in those. And with that being said, let's move away with the talk. So let's go back over the demo machine. I will go ahead and put myself back in the frame here. So, and let's talk about some of the big ones here. So, let's start with the biggest one of them all, title name itself, right? So if you're going to send us a brand new title that somehow has eluded eluded our spies or our editors for all these years, and it did not appear on solicitations from publishers and things like that. However it is you came into being with it, it's a brand new title, you're sure of it, and it's not in the database already, which, by the way, is probably tip number one. Make sure the stuff you're submitting to us isn't already in the database already. Let's make that bonus tip number one. Easiest way to do that for almost everything is if it has a barcode on it. Oh, excellent. Of course, the new machine wants to restart. No, I'm going to say not now. And watch, it will restart in the middle of the show. That will be terrific, because that's the sort of thing that has to happen. All right, but anyway, if the thing that you're looking at has a barcode on it, very first thing I would do for anything at all, scan that barcode into ComicBase, see if anything pops up. Okay, if it doesn't, then what you want to do is look by the most odd part of the name you can find. By that, I say, like, if you're talking about a title called Oh, let's have a weird discussion like Spider-Man Chaos in Calgary. Let's say that's the name of the title you're looking at. The weirdest part of that one is not Spider-Man. Spider-Man is used in dozens and dozens and dozens, really hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of titles. No, it's the word Calgary. So you could type Spider-Man Chaos in Calgary, and you might get a hit. But in case you're wondering, just how many comics do you think there are about Calgary? And as it turns out, you probably won't see a hit on that one either, but you'll see a hit on what's called an item title, where it'll tell you that's the name of one of the giveaway public service series issues of Spider-Man. But yeah, that's when you want to look up something in the database. Tip number one, always check by barcode. Number two, check for the weirdest piece of the title that you're sure is in there. So, don't use, if it has like a bizarre subtitle or things like that that might not have been part of the proper title, don't use that one if you can avoid it. Go for the weirdest word in the actual title and see if anything pops. But if it doesn't, we'll take it from there. Greg Hecht in the chat says, good rule of thumb, if it's Marvel or DC pre-2000, there's a good chance it's already in the database. If you aren't fine, yeah, I'd say if it's pre-2000 for Marvel and DC, I would be absolutely flabbergasted if it wasn't in the database already. I think we get 1 or 2 items a year that show up on something like that, unless they're just a very obscure variation of something. That sort of thing does happen. But definitely do that. And Greg Hecht also says, if you aren't finding it, please post it on the message boards and ask. And he also says, if you're not finding your database, try rebuilding your list. Great practical tip there. So one thing that comes up in ComicBase, and this is worth knowing just in general, if you go to your file menu and go to File Tools, there's an item down here right at the top, says Rebuild Lists. And what that lets you do is it lets you choose different lists that the program keeps. And the big 4, these ones right here, series information, list of owned series, item information. Those are the ones that, what this is actually doing is it's going through the database and essentially running a data scrub and also a recompute on anything that's a computed field. Like for instance, with titles, there's a field known as the display title or the sort title, which if I have a title called Aliens, or like let's say it's let's say it was called The Aliens Portfolio was the name, or Aliens Portfolio, comma, the, right? Let's say that was the full name of the title. The title would be Aliens Portfolio, comma, the. In this case, if you're looking at the screen, it doesn't actually have a the. Let's just play along for now. But there'd be a display title, which would be The Aliens Portfolio. And there'd also be a sort title, which would be something like Aliens Portfolio all run together as one word with an exclamation point after the end, to indicate that there was an article, definite article after, at the beginning of it, which is the way that controls how that sorts when you're seeing lists of things. Yeah, definitely. It never hurts to go ahead and do a rebuild of your lists. It might be a waste of your time, but it never really hurts because it's essentially non-destructive except for the things that you really ought to want destroyed, which is to say, when you go to item information, it will flush out any absolutely duplicate notes. If you have any absolutely like if you list, Art Adams as the artist 3 times on the same line, it'll flush that down to just 1, and it'll standardize his name as Arthur Adams, which whatever his official name is, but it does have a big list of creator aliases and their official names in the database. It will standardize formatting of certain things. Like if you'd say Legacy issue number 929, it will standardize it to the LGY space number sign 929 and so forth, which is the official ComicBase style. So forth. And then the advanced over here, the list of contributors, storylines, and notes, that one's actually kind of interesting. What it does there is it basically has a list. If you guys have ever done a search for any of those things, for artists, writers, any kind of creator, translators, editors, inkers, as well as storylines, and then there were none, Nightmare over Gotham, whatever the thing is. It keeps an index of those, and whenever it sees a new one it hasn't seen before, it adds it to the index, so it helps you when you're searching for storylines. That's what fills in those autocomplete lists you see. And the other thing that's actually pretty cool about that one is it also figures out what the frequency of the different artists, writers, etc. are, so that when you are, say, typing for a writer and you just type the word M, like M-A, it'll know the most popular M in comic books is Mark Waid, and it'll autocomplete. It'll offer to fill for you Mark Waid. Just similarly, if you typed in Byrne or BY, it'll offer John Byrne as the artist, depending on what the context is of what the autocomplete is. But the calculations that go into that get recomputed whenever you do that rebuild for your contributor storylines and notes. So if you've never done it before, worth a few minutes to go ahead and run that once. And it'll say things like, hey, I cleaned up 173 or 15,000 whatever notes and things like that. It's kind of a good OCD feeling to go ahead and do that. So it is definitely worth doing, but it also will help you if you're having trouble locating things, because it forces, once again, the database to look at every single thing and make sure that's in the that quick find list. Anyway, thank you for that. The person who suggested that would be Greg Hecht. Oh, and he also suggested, and I'll finally look for it on Atomic Avenue. Atomic Avenue is synced to the master database once every week. That's actually part of pushing update. So if you can find it there and you see the pictures and everything like there, you'll know we've got it and what's cool. So another good tip. But anyway, back to the data part in ComicBase. So let's assume you've got a title and it's not in the database. You've looked, it's definitely not there, and you want to add it. Okay, so I've already talked about this a little bit. Is make sure you put it in, in case with the article last. Let me see if I can scroll forward a couple and. Okay, so that one's okay. So let me go to one that's not complicated to describe. Let's go with Avengers. Oh, hey, how about if I go under comics? That'll help. Also helps if I put my mouse on the same screen as I'm using. Okay, let's go to comic books and look for Avengers, because if you're looking for Avengers in books, it's probably a different deal for the most part. All right, so let's look at Avengers. So first thing you'll notice about Avengers is the Avengers is Avengers, the. So we do this library case, so you don't file the Avengers under T. That'd be silly. You'd put it under A for Avengers. And that is the way that ComicBase expects the title to be. So if I go and I look at the title for Avengers, you'll see it is Avengers, the, even though it appears as the Avengers when you print it out. So that's that display title I was talking about beforehand. That's it in action. When you go and submit your own title, though, make sure you put the article at the end. So whether it's A and the, or if it's a foreign article, L, die der das, lila la, het. There's a list of it's actually a surprisingly small number of articles that get used in all the Western printable languages. I think it's something like 46 words, covers all of the languages we've ever found. But we will look for those, and if you have any of those articles, put it comma that article. So same thing goes for if it was El Mariachi is the name of it. Yes, as a non-Spanish speaker myself, I might think that El Mariachi goes under E. No, it does not. It goes under Mariachi, comma El, because it's mariachi is the important part, not the, because that's all El means in Spanish. So anyway, go ahead and put that in there. There's one subtlety on this one where if you have a colon in the name, and let's go back to our friend Aliens for that one. I just saw it. Oh, because I was looking under books before. Of course. Let's go back under books now. Because I was thinking, oh yeah, I should talk about that, just not right now. So let's go back to books and look at Aliens. Okay, so here we are, Aliens, the Female War, right? Okay, so in that case, if it's after the colon, then the article comes first. So you don't put Aliens. So if it was the Aliens, the Female War, it'd be Aliens, comma, the colon, the Female War is how you would alphabetize that. And yes, and it will descramble that as you go. But if it's after a colon, after anything like that, then you put the article straight up there. You don't put the comma at the end, because if I put the comma at the end, that would then become the Aliens again, and we don't want that. So anyway, that is the fine point of that one for anyone who ever really, really wondered about how colons and articles interact. That is how it goes. All right. Other things about this. When you submit data, by the way, when you're adding in new titles, incredibly helpful for us if you use the same publishers that we do. So one of the things that we're doing when we rebuild our lists here is we're also getting the list of publishers in there. So if you just start typing the publisher as you go, it's going to try to suggest the most commonly used publishers starts with those names. As soon as you see the one that's yours, stop there. ComicBase style is to not use, unless we have to, the subdivision or subgrouping, etc., of the publishing thing. If you ever look at a large publishing house, like say Penguin Random House, they will have things like, they will have divisions called like, Penguin Young Fish, Penguin Young Fiction. And so if you actually look in the book involved, it'll say it's published by Penguin Young Fiction Division. We don't want that. No, that for our purposes, that's a Penguin book. It put under Penguin. If you want to write that in the copyright that it was published by Penguin Young Fiction for some reason, I guess knock yourself out. But honestly, for all practical purposes, it's Penguin. Typically, what we'll go with is the least words we can go with to make the publisher name distinct. So we don't say Bantam Doubleday, we just say Bantam. We don't say Bantam Express, we just say Bantam, and so forth. If you do what everyone else did, you'll largely be in the right place on that one. But if, for instance, there was one that came up just recently where something like Mad Cave versus Mad Cave Studios. If you see that everyone else is putting their stuff under Mad Cave, please don't put yours under Mad Cave Studios. It splits the picture folder management for no good reason, and it doesn't help anything. One thing that I definitely do appreciate, though, on the other hand, is if you could put in the copyright. The copyright by default is going to want to default to TM and C, whatever the publisher's name is. Very, very good especially if you're going to submit a picture, if you actually go open the book up or comic or whatever else and put in the actual copyright notice on there. We are using all the data in ComicBase by permission, which is, so just getting the legal end of things just for a minute, we don't own the covers of Spider-Man that are included with ComicBase. We don't own the covers of Aliens: The Female War. In this case, not a problem because we apparently don't have a cover for Aliens: The Female War, at least not that edition. But Aliens Rogue, right, was put out by Bantam. The copyright's probably owned by 20th Century Fox, which was then licensing it to Bantam, who then gave us permission to run it. And by permission, that means, yeah, you can use it under the auspices of, we say it's okay with us. Now, we could just grab it, right? I mean, a lot of people do that and they say they state a legal doctrine known as fair use. Fair use is a great way to go out of business if you're someone playing with other people's copyrighted works, because you can never have an affirmative fair use defense. Fair use basically takes, I believe it's 5 different planks, the amount being used, whether you're using it for editorial purposes and so forth. And it tries to measure whether or not this is permissible under copyright law. The problem, of course, is under U.S. copyright law, anyone can sue you. And it doesn't take too many people suing, well, almost anyone, before you've ruined yourself on the legal fees to defend the usage. So we decided we're not going to play that. What we're going to do instead is we're going to ask very sweetly to everyone, hi, please, could we use your stuff? And one of the things that we say as part of asking sweetly is, and by the way, we're going to make every effort possible to make sure we note your copyright and the whole thing, and to let people know that this is trademarked and copyrighted by you, not us, and so that we want to respect your copyright. This is, we spent 3 years was, I think, the longest we spent, and we're getting the copyright permission from EC Comics. And one thing that the person who is in charge of giving that to us, a shout out to Dorothy Carroll, said, it's like, yeah, you're one of the few people who actually bothers to ask. We really appreciate that. And I'm thinking, Dorothy, you're a lovely lady. I've really enjoyed talking with you for the last 3 years, but did it have to take 3 years? Anyway, so with that said, if you could help keep us on straight as well, whenever you submit a new title that we haven't seen before, please do make sure you put in the trademark and copyright notes to the best of your ability. It's good karma all around, so keep the karma flowing. And another thing that helps a lot is when you go ahead and you submit, especially if it's a brand new title, is make some effort to give us a clue as to when it was published. Now, you might not know. You might be holding a single issue of a particular magazine. So let's say I'm looking at this Bantam Aliens Rogue from Bantam. I know it's from Bantam. I can open it up, and if you see it's published in 1995, say great. It was published in 1995, or there might have been later issues that might have been a different date, but at least 1995 is a good place to start. That does help us a lot. Oh, and also, while I'm asking for the moon here, look down here at the bottom right. when you're filling the stuff out. Now, we actually have, and we talked about this in previous shows, we actually have an AI auto suggest that will help on this one. Let me go ahead. Sorry, I just want to put myself in the frame, not take the frame away. But see if you can give us some tags that go with it. Think of it as just exercise and fan service. So if it's like Aliens Rogue, hey, put Aliens in is one of the things in there. It's horror, it's licensed, it's a novelization of something, it's science fiction. If there are other things that seem appropriate to you, by all means, go ahead and stick the tags in there. That goes over to our editors as part of the information that they review. And if they agree with your tag, then they will add it. As a matter of fact, you can actually submit whole new tags that we have never thought of. And if we start seeing this, like, some practical purpose in using that, again and again, like let's say you were just the world's biggest collector of stamp related material. And so you might want to say, philately or stamp collecting, and you might want to put that as a tag. Now, honestly, the first time or two that we see that, we probably are going to be like, yes, stamp collecting. Go ahead and keep that as a personal tag. We're not going to make an official tag. Doesn't matter to anyone else. But before we push it as one of the official tags that goes into everyone's list, we might want to see some extra things on that. But if you were to put in, and there actually were whole comic books, they're like U.S. stamp comics or stamp collecting, stories or things like that. I forget the actual names of them, but there actually is a subgenre of comic books that relates to stamp collecting, and stories that were told on U.S. commemorative postage stamps. If you feel like this is important enough for the world to know, and you could submit us a few pieces of data to convince us, the threshold for getting a new tag accepted by us, probably about 5 things would get it. If we saw the need, if there are only ever going to be like 2 things tagged in that, we don't want to clutter up everyone's database for it. But honestly, if you were to find things that were tagged with 5, like if there were 5 things that legitimately really needed that tag, that's probably enough to rate inclusion on our master list. So yeah, go ahead and put that in if it's a new idea of yours. But if you're not thinking of that, at the very least, go ahead and hit this little AI button down here on the right. Which I guess this little magic wand thing, this is now the official symbol of AI-itude. It's now in people's emoji sets. It's being used consistently. So yeah, you'll see a little twinkle, twinkle, little star thing. Apparently that means AI. So go ahead and click on that. And what it's going to do is it's going to draw on the name of what you did, who published it, the description if you provided it, and anything else it can find on the interwebs, and try to figure out what tags belong to it. So at the very least, go ahead and slap the AI tag, and that, again, it gives people somewhere to start. And I guess also makes it so if remember that one bug we had that applied in only like 0.5% of all cases where there was no tag existing, and you happen to start the program on that, it makes that sort of thing even harder for us to find, and we appreciate a good challenge. So go ahead and do that. All right, that's everything I want to say about titles. Let's get on to the data itself. Let's talk about fields. I'm going to go over to comic books on this one. All right, the number one thing that people need to get right and get wrong, is driving us crazy, is this item description field right here. All right, let's start with, just look down the list here and ask yourself, why is there no item description for number 1, but there is for B, C, D, E, etc., and why the hell isn't there one for A? Great question. And that is a gap in our data right now. What the item description is for is to tell people, why is this the A cover, the B cover, the C cover, the E cover? You don't need to tell me why it's the number 1 cover. It's the regular number 1. It's that is what you would expect if something called 38, and you don't need to put an item description saying, well, it's issue 38. No, we know that already. If it's 38A, though, I got to know what made it different than the regular 38, and that's the whole purpose of the item description field. Now, this one over here. So this is a reprint from Avengers number 1. The indicia reads as Avengers number 1, The Coming of the Avengers, and it has remastered colors. I guess that's a description of sorts. This is what the cover apparently looks like. Probably, usually the thing that you see most commonly on this one, if I could make out who the heck that little squiggle in the bottom right-hand corner is. Well, by the way, let me show you a trick on that one. Let me go ahead and select that right here. Let me show you this cool trick. All right, so if you highlight the line, it's going to update the thumbnail right there. If I'm in the archive edition and I click the whole thing, it's going to show me the whole thing. But even at that size, I still can't make out the picture, right? Well, What I could do is I could open this thing up in Photoshop and try to figure it out myself, or check this out. If you click on the line, show it in the thumbnail, and now click on the thumbnail, what you can do from here is you actually can zoom in the thumbnail to the nth degree. And then you will see that that actually says Kirby, which I think it basically means it's someone doing it after Kirby. So it didn't solve my problem in any case, but you actually can go and scroll the mouse up and down, just roll the mouse wheel, as well as dragging the cursor around, and you can make that thing as large as you possibly can. But even looking at actual pictures on that one, yeah, that just says Kirby. And I know that that's not Jack Kirby. You're doing it after Jack Kirby, because this is the original cover right here, which was actually done by Jack Kirby. And this is clearly not the same artist, but he's clearly drawing the same image. So anyway, I still don't know who drew 1A. If you do know who drew number 1A, go ahead and by all means put it in the indicia. That does help. Matter of fact, let me check one more way I can have of solving this one since we're on it. If I go to credits, and it's just a lie. Well, no, I'm rethinking myself on this one. What if the actual note was actually accurate, and what I'm really seeing is it is the Jack Kirby thing. It's just recolored by an unknown artist. And that makes complete sense because that's exactly what it says. So anyway, if you were submitting this one and you wanted to be on our good side, you would say something oh, I don't know, this is the 2012 reprint. I would say something like 2012 facsimile edition with cover A by, which cover A? Come on, space, by Jack Kirby and name of artist. Colors. Actually fill in the name of the artist on that one. But if you were then to submit that to us, you would have our eternal thanks, because then we would actually have an item description for 1A, and you would be the hero of the realm at that point, and I would give you a shout out on the next live stream, because that would just mean that you're really cool. But anyway, what you're trying to do here with the item description, but here is just tell people what makes this the A edition, the B edition, the whatever edition. What makes this the 1.5 edition? Well, 1.5 because those wacky people at Marvel. What did I just do here? Sorry about that. I did not update this database before we went here. But the 1.5 edition is there because those wacky people at Marvel actually called it 1.5. I can't even make this stuff up. They called it 1.5 right there. So yeah, that's the thing. And then the 1.5 / newsstand is the newsstand edition with cover by Bruce Timm. That's a perfectly great description of that. Unfortunately, we don't have a cover of the newsstand edition, so yeah, go figure. All right, so anyway, that's what we want to have in the item description field. Now, the formula for a proper item description is adjective, like GalaxyCon exclusive. That's the adjectival part. You want to say what it is. This is the facsimile edition and then with cover, name the cover, H in this case, by the guy. Now, the only thing that would make this thing even better is if you said that if this was a 1 in 10 cover or a 1 in 50 color, if you say like 1:50, 1:10, etc. Don't put the limited to in the item description. That really goes in the notes. One thing that's really nice about that is because the limited to doesn't tell you that tells you the circulation, but it doesn't tell you how to identify it, and that's really the way of that's the thing you want to find in the item description field. If you have additional things you want to say about the comic, it was the first appearance of the Avengers, it was limited to so many copies, it was autographed by such and such. If it was part of an official release where they actually they had Jack Kirby sign 500 copies of this with a certificate of authenticity, then at that point go ahead and say autographed by Jack Kirby with COA or with certificate of authenticity. Then that works for the item description. But anything else you want to say that just describes the contents, put that in the notes. Don't put that in the item description. Now, we talked about let's find a look at those Spider-Man public service series here. So let's see if I can find Chaos in Calgary. There we go. All right. We talked about this one earlier. Spider-Man Chaos in Calgary, and it says named items in other titles. What the heck is that about? All right, this is a different field. This is not the item description. This is the item title field. And let's give it a second to find this one. This one is not super fast to look up because it has to do a search across, I don't know, 1.5 million rows to find this stuff. So give it just a second. All right, here we go. There was a series once upon a time called the Amazing Spider-Man Public Service Series. This was one of the first PSA type things that we ever indexed in ComicBase. Had it not felt very rare at the time, we probably wouldn't have named it so generically, but at the time it was just the Amazing Spider-Man Public Service Series. And the reason it was called that is because there were 4 issues of it: Skating on Thin Ice, Double Trouble, Hit and Run, which I think had something to do with, I don't know, looking both ways or riding bike helmets or something. It had Ghost Rider in it. I don't know. Didn't read that one. And Chaos in Calgary, which I'm not sure what the public service thing involved here was. You know, watch out for bull rinks in Calgary. I'm not, anyone who read that one, you know, let me know. I guess there was a 5th issue as well. But anyway, if you open this book up, you would see that this was Amazing Spider-Man Chaos in Calgary #4. But if at that point we were wise to the fact that they were running this as a series, and so we said, no, this is the Amazing Spider-Man Public Service Series. And everyone had figured this out by the early 90s. So even Overstreet had it listed that way. So we also listed it that way. One problem you get, though, is not everyone's going to know the history of the book before they try to index the bloody thing. So they are looking at something called Amazing Spider-Man Chaos in Calgary #4. They don't see anything called Amazing Spider-Man Chaos in Calgary, and they think, oh, it's a brand new title. I better release the new series, and maybe those lovely people at ComicBase will figure out what happened to Chaos in Calgary numbers 1 through 3. And the answer, of course, is we'll say, that's actually Spider-Man Public Service Series. We got tired of doing this after 28 years or so, and we introduced a brand new field called the item title. The item title, this field right over here, this one is meant for what does the book say on it prominently, typically on the cover, sometimes in the indicia, where we know it's not really that title. There's currently a hot debate going on right now as to whether the current issues of Aquaman 9th series are they really Emperor Aquaman, or is in next month, is it going to switch back to just being Aquaman 9th series, or maybe even 10th series by then? Who knows? Our model on this one is the different issues of Captain America, where it was Captain America and Falcon, Captain America with Falcon, or Peter Parker Spider-Man, Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man, and then back to Spectacular Spider-Man. Our thought on that particular issue with the Emperor Aquaman one is, it kind of feels to us like a short-lived, let's give the title some variety thing. We don't really feel like there are hearts in it to really call the Aquaman, Emperor Aquaman, for the rest of his known life. So we're holding this one in right now as an item title that we attach to the current issue of Aquaman. Same thing over here is that we knew that this was clearly an ongoing public service series. Issue #4 just happened to be called Chaos in Calgary. So if you put in Chaos in Calgary in the item title on this one, then it gives everybody a cross index. So without switching where the title officially belongs, and there's usually a pretty good reason for us to not go by the indicia, but without going that, it still gives you a find hook, so you can find it. And that's what the item title is really for. All right, hopefully we've beaten that one to death. I see here. Yeah, Greg says, I almost feel like it'd be worth renaming that field to variant identifier or something like that. Yeah, we're not changing anymore. We workshopped the name of that and item title and item description so far, because we remember they have to be also, it's not, we have to not just talk about why it's the variant. We have to also say, why is it called the HC edition, the SC edition, the LTD edition. So it's not always a variant, because variation means something very specific in ComicBase too. We are getting into semantic overload land for sure. But one thing that does help when you're filling it out is, if you notice, when the field is actually blank, it actually tells you how to use it. It's like the name of the title of this item if it differs from the series name. And as soon as you start typing, it goes and tells you the rest. So anyway, that is that. Okay, and then overall title, worth talking about very briefly. Like we saw this on the Aliens. I think it was Rogue. What was that one called? Aliens something. The title we were on just a minute ago. Well, let's go back to books, see if it pops us back there. Come on, mouse. Where are you? All right, Aliens Rogue. I think if we traipse back a minute, or was it the other way? Anyway, one of these guys, I will either stumble across or I won't, is like, oh, here we are. Aliens, the Female War is book 3 of Aliens. All right, what the heck is that about? All right, what that means is that is called the overall title. So just like you can have a individual issue that doesn't really belong to the title it's in. So, you would give that thing an item title, right? So you call it out, it really isn't its own series, but it does have its own kind of unique name. Chaos in Calgary isn't its own series, not really. It's really just another name for issue number 4 of the Amazing Spider-Man Public series. Aliens, the Female War. Hey, it's on the book. It's on the cover. Everyone knows it's called Aliens, the Female War. Let me see. Do we have? Oh, I guess we. If I download, I guess we do have a cover of that one. I go ahead and display that one. There we are. So if I'm looking at this thing, you'll see that it does say Aliens, the Female War right there. But it also says book 3. Well, wait a minute. That's not issue number 3. Book 3 of what? If I were looking at the indicia, if I were looking at anything else, it's just called Aliens, the Female War. It's just that when they were publishing this one, they had the idea in their head that there was sort of a longer arc, Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone or Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone is book 1 of the Harry Potter saga, you could say. Now, when it first came out, it was just Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. It was, something that struggling housewife and unemployed writer over in England hoped that someone would buy a few copies of. But by the time the sales report started coming in, it was clear there was going to be a number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, etc. And so in retrospect, it got to be known as, book 1 of the Harry Potter saga. So same thing can go here for Aliens, the Female War is, I guess if you've been telling a story long enough, you can start saying, yeah, there was a larger series that this is part of and start, retroactively or not naming it that way. Where you find that is on the title information, because this applies to the title as a whole, not the issue. And what that will say is the overall title on this one is Aliens, and this is issue number 3 of that. So that's the overall title. And I think if I blank this out, it'll actually tell you, if applicable, the name of a larger series, which this title is but of one entry of. And in this case, it's the Aliens overall title. There apparently is also an Aliens versus Predator overall title, and it was offering to autocomplete that for me. So yes, if the book or the title as a whole is part of a larger meta title, when you're going and putting that in, by all means, it's very helpful to go and put that in as the overall title when you submit. Okay, hopefully that is somewhat clear. Let's see. Okay. Oh, Asian Gap says, great question. Please explain the use of the parentheses in a title like Stan Lee Presents and the need for the ... the ellipsis characters. All right. So, what this comes down to is, let's see. All right. So remember, my ComicBase time started in 1991. That's when we first, had the program and started indexing the first books into ComicBase. And so much of the conventions that we've established over time, the ones that stuck around often date to 1991, which you could say that things make a lot of sense back in that context, or you might say, well, they seem increasingly silly. Now, if they seem really ridiculously silly, we tend to have lost them over time. But there is a real, they call it the installed base effect. In other words, if you guys have been putting your books into ComicBase over all these years, we try not to have to make you move them, because it's confusing and it messes up your collection. We don't want that to happen. And these days we actually have the ability to automatically move them if based on their barcode if we can. But we really resist it if we possibly can. One of the conventions that was very, very hot in the early 90s, if you remember things like Brian Pulido's Lady Death, or Brian Pulido's Evil Ernie, something like that. Now, this was back in, Todd McFarlane had just made money, in the early Image guys, as being, I guess maybe Stan Lee was one of the first guys, or Walt Disney, one of the first guys who stuck their name right in the front of the whole thing because they want to have a brand to be themselves. Because if you can be the brand, if this is Peter Bickford's ComicBase, if I think I can push that, and that, then the next project from Peter Bickford you might want to buy. Well, the same thing was going from Walt Disney's the Horse and the Hound, the Walt Disney's The Little Mermaid, Walt Disney's every damn thing. You could start them all with Walt Disney's, but that'd be a lot of typing when everyone's really thinking Peter Pan is the name of the whole thing. They don't think that Walt Disney is really part of it. You just think that it's called the appellation. Walt Disney's is really just kind of commercial fluffery. Same thing goes for Brian Pulido's Lady Death, or who's the dude who did Aspen? Let me look. But Aspen. Aspen presents. Yeah, anyway, but there were a lot of things like Jay Anacleto's This Thing, where it's or Witchblade, stuff like that, where the official title it might have been like now of course I'm completely blanking out on Witchblade. That's awesome comic booking, Bickford. Witchblade, thank you. Witchblade was done by, of course, not the guy I'm thinking of. Oh my god, I'm such a fail. Who am I even trying to think of right now? I'm looking at the writer. Oh, Michael Turner. Yeah, okay. Yeah, Michael Turner. Perfect example. So you had Michael Turner's Witchblade, or Michael Turner's this, that, or the other thing. The problem is normal people are looking at the thing. They're looking at the ginormous real title of the thing. No one ever says, oh, hi. No one ever walks into a comic book shop and says, hey, do you have the latest issue of Michael Turner's Witchblade? No one has ever done that. No one's ever gone to the M section looking for Michael Turner's Witchblade. Or they don't typically go to the B section looking for Brian Pulido's Lady Death. They go to the L section. So we made the standard long time ago that if the part of the title, if it's just an appellation, if it's just fluffery, and it's a judgment call, then we put it at the end, parenthesis, ellipsis. So perfect example of this one, the one you asked about, Agent of Camp, is Stan Lee presents whatever the heck. Because you're looking at the title, you're thinking, I'm looking at a book called The Incredible Hulk, or I'm looking at a book called, Superhero Puzzles and Games. You're not thinking, yes, it says right at the top, Stan Lee presents Superhero Puzzles and Games, but it turns out Stan Lee presented about as many things as Walt Disney presented, but no one was ever going to look for them under that section. And so that's where the convention came from of, when it's officially part of the name, but no sane person would ever file it under that, they'd put it under the real name, the way that we all think of it, then the appellation goes to the end of the title, and ending in ellipsis. Now, ellipsis is actually a funny little character. It's the ... will get you there in the end if you're really, really cool, because there's about a 1 or 2 pixel difference depending on what font you're using. There's actually an ellipsis character. And one of the things that ComicBase will actually try to do when you do a title cleanup is it'll actually look for the ellipsis, the ... and change it into an ellipsis character, which is this, the ComicBase standard. Much the same way that if you're typing in a title and you put -- we'll convert that to what's called an M hyphen, automatically. That's just, we came from Apple. Typography matters to us. So anyway, just from the word go, that was something that we've always tried to get right. And so you always know that we will always curve our quotes and try to use the proper characters for all these things. So anyway, that's the story on that one. And Marvel Age of Camp says, Stan Lee, Marvel East does have Stan Lee presents at the top of the first page after the thing. Marvel Superhero Secret Wars. Now that one's actually really interesting because you sit there and say, is it Secret Wars or is it Marvel Superhero Secret Wars? And I believe the correct answer is it's Marvel Superhero Secret Wars. Maybe not. Let's see. Secret Wars. So that's the Secret Wars that came out in 2015. There was also a Marvel Super Oh, I'm spelling superhero wrong, aren't I? Secret. Is it superheroes? Yeah, it's Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars. And you can see it here. Yes, Secret Wars is obviously it's the key part of the title. And for some reason we don't have this computer does not have that one downloaded. Let's see if I can pull it. No, it did not download these ones. Let me see. Let me see if I can pull down. Oh, I'm really download on this computer all the covers of this one so I can show you nice, pretty covers of all these. Unless, of course, this computer just lost its internet connection, in which case, yeah, we'll move on. Oh, sorry. And you're not even seeing it because I didn't think to switch the thing. No, it looks like that computer lost its internet connection, so it's struggling. All right. Anyway, but if you look at the title of Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars, by the way, Marvel and DC have trademarked super-heroes. In this case, they didn't hyphenate. Go figure. That's actually part of their trademark. Bizarre comic book trivia, like Spider-Man is a Spider-Man is trademarked exactly that way. If you spell Spider-Man or Spider-Man, you're either foreign or you're just wrong. But anyway, Marvel Superhero Secret Wars was definitely part of the title. They later came up with a second follow-up to it called just Secret Wars. They got rid of the Marvel Superheroes part. I don't know why, but they did that. So yeah, it's not an appellation, it's just confusing. And if someone was to go and suggest alternates on that one where they just called the Marvel Superhero Secret Wars, if they gave them item titles of Secret Wars, I wouldn't say no to that, because as a cross-reference, I actually think it'd be halfway useful. So it goes. Thomas B. as well in the chat pointed out there was Marvel Superhero Secret Wars. Okay, I think we've hit that one. All right, commas versus semicolons. Let's move on with some other things. All right, so let's go ahead and go to a title with a bunch of stuff in it. Let's go to my favorite Avengers here, if I can get my mouse back. All right, let's go to Avengers, because we got a lot of things to talk about under Avengers. All right, let's look at some of these fields over here. When these things came along, when ComicBase first started, we kind of had two sets of fields that we were tracking information on. Well, I mean, there was numbers, but of the things that took text, there were basically two types. There was the kind that you would normally try to, if you have multiple items in a text field, the most natural way people talk about this is they put commas in between them. So if 5 people worked on a title, you'd say, this was written by, Todd McFarlane and Jack Kirby and, and Stan Lee and, whoever the heck worked on it, you put a comma next to each of the names of the writer. Same thing goes for the artist. You'd put a comma between all those ones. That works great until you get to things like the notes, where notes, very typical in a note, to have things that you'd want to say comma just in general, it's the first appearance of Nick, or of Blade, comma the Vampire Hunter, right? Blade the Vampire Hunter is one guy, right? In cases where it seemed like a comma might occur naturally within a particular item, we adopted the convention back in the day when we had less fields and we had more room to show them. We would put them on separate lines, and we would do this automatically for you. I think we still do. It's just it never comes up. Is if you put them on separate lines, we would automatically wrap them up using semicolons to distinguish them if we had to show that whole thing as a note, like say on a report. So anything that had been on 2 lines would be the first line, semicolon, the second line, so forth. Or you could just shortcut the whole process, which is pretty much how everyone does these days, is put a semicolon in between the individual items on anything that could naturally contain a comma, which for ComicBase's purposes, that's the item description, the notes, the storylines, the item title. Actually, no, item title just takes one anyway. You can only have one item. I think that's pretty much it. But anyway, and that's actually one of the things that the item cleanup will actually try very hard to figure out whether you accidentally typed a semicolon in the wrong place when you were typing artists or writers, and when it doesn't do as much because it's impossible to tell whether that comma you put in between the two things on the notes was really meant to be a separate line. We get it in a few rare cases, where we can really dial it in, but that we normally can't tell, which is why we had to do the semicolon in the first place. But yes, anything like an item description, a note, or storyline, use semicolons to differentiate different items, not commas. And anything else, typically comma is your friend. Um, all right. And then what were the other things I wanted to say before? We talked about the titles already. We talked about the item titles. We talked about item notes, and we talked about notes. All right. I think we talked about enough on that one because we're already hitting the top of the hour and we haven't gotten to movies yet. So we've already gotten our note about the announcements. By the way, these are the PSAs. Number one, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. If this is the sort of thing that is useful to you, please hit that like button. It helps us a lot. And if you share or comment, it helps us even more because it lets other people know it's sort of interesting to people like you, and then they tend to share them. So that's a good thing. Other things, there's a ComicBase message board over at forums.comicbase.com, and also there's a dedicated thread there to suggest live stream topics. And don't forget to check out Atomic Avenue, the ComicBase powered venue for buying and selling comics, books, and magazines. All right, here endeth the chat. Let's move on to movie type reviews. And I probably won't do all of them in great detail, but I do want to tell you about some things I saw this week. So if you think that you are likely to watch more than about 5 movies this summer, I'm going to say the AMC Prime Movie Pass, if you have AMC theaters by you, not a bad deal. They're raising the price in about a week or two by like a buck or two, but it basically comes down to like for $27 a month, you can watch 4 movies a week. So you could, if you use this thing to the max, get 16 movies for $27, which is hard to say no to. Now the whole thing is, do you have that many movies that you want to see? Not really, but there were a bunch that were coming up that I did want to see. And so I thought, well, let's go for this. Now you're committed for like 3 months, so don't do it unless, so if you think, well, yeah, I know what I'll do. I'll buy the thing and I'll cancel it and I'll watch 20 movies a month and then I'll never buy it again. No, they're still going to stick you for the extra 2 months because they know they're wise to you, man. They've already figured that angle out. But it is, I'm going to say it is pretty good, as a deal. And it did get me into the theater, that and cheaper movie prices in Destin, Florida, where occasionally I nip down for a weekend off with the wife. That is the thing that actually got me back in the movie theaters after like more than a year away, which, crazy making, because again, as a kid, I went to movies as often as I possibly could, and the idea I would go a whole year or more and not see a movie, it was just, you got to be kidding me, because movies are kind of awesome when they're awesome. But when you say the average movie price is going to set you $20 for the ticket, and then $2 for a reservation fee, and another $20 for the popcorn, and you see the concession deals like, oh yeah, for the low price of $27, you can get a hot dog, a popcorn, and a drink. That's like a whole buck's worth of material you're shoving in your mouth for a low price of $28. Yeah, who wouldn't want to go for that deal? But anyway, I will say, yeah, most movies don't make any sense if you make it so it's going to cost you $100 to see them. If you're taking, you, the wife, a kid, and buying a popcorn, if that's $100 date, you know what? Most people are going to stay home for that one. And I think the theaters got to be knowing this at this point. So you are starting to see them offering some much more competitive deals. And AMC Prime's their version. They had Movie Pass for a while, but that one was, I think, in the middle of COVID death. And it was definitely, it was a sketch. This is about the only way I could put that one. It was clearly the economics that were not there. But the MC Prime thing seems like a decently balanced little promo. I use that one to lower my price enough so I could see a bunch of stuff that I talked about on last week's trailer project. Number one thing I saw was Obsession, fantastic little horror film by a 26-year-old whose name I'm completely blanking on right now. The premise on that one is this guy likes this girl. She doesn't know he existed, or if she does know he exists, that she certainly has not made any great efforts to return his affections. He's gone out of his mind, and he buys a gimmick magic, trick, kind of charm in a store called a One Wish Willow. And the idea is it's a little $6.99 thing here. You break it in half, it gives you one wish, and then you got your wish. That's it. So he was going to give it to her as a present. He can't get the words out of his mouth. He just gets so frustrated at the end after she, leaves him. He drops her off. She leaves him. Goes in the house. He's just like, I just wish he loved me as much as more than anyone in the world. And next thing you know, she's knocking on his door, and then suddenly she is all gung ho for this guy, and it's really great, and it's really lovely and romantic and nice and sweet until it's really, really, really not. Anyway, absolutely terrific little horror film. It was micro budget. It means they made this thing for between 750,000 and $1 million. This is the sort of thing where the financiers on this thing probably hit up the family dentist or something like that and said, hey, would you like to back my kid's film? That level of financing got this thing made. And this thing, I believe, is sitting somewhere around 200 million at the box office right now. It is insane. This thing this thing will be told in film legends till the end of time, as far as being one of the, if not one of the highest payments on investment of any movie that's ever been made. Made by a 26-year-old YouTuber, and did a terrific job. The entire cast on it is terrific, and absolutely it relies on some just incredible performances by the two leads, particularly the woman, because she has to go through emotional range on like the blink of an eye, because she's essentially acting as if she's possessed by the wish. And they absolutely sell the hell out of this thing. Really great. It ends messy. It's not one where you're I was joking, I saw it with my sister, and she kind of walked out of the film, and I wasn't saying a whole lot about the whole thing. I got the feeling that, I'd asked, hey, do you want to see this or Backroom? She said, this one makes more sense to me. And I was joking on the way. I was saying, well, yeah, that one's done really great box office, but where I think it's really going to score is when people figure out what a great date movie it makes, which was obviously the blackest of black humor, because if you have ever had anyone in your life personally, or that who's ever dated someone with, like, say, bipolar disorder, they're going to watch this movie like this. Because it's a lot like what they were doing, just worse. Anyway, terrific movie, full recommendation. Not a date movie. Do not see this one as a date movie unless your sense of humor is even darker than mine, and then seek help. But anyway, absolutely great. The movie that I really, really want to see, the one that actually got me to buy the movie pass in the first place, was a movie called Backrooms, made by an even younger film director, a 20-year-old guy. Again, the idea that this guy, he made his first version of this one, I think, when he was 16. He made the full-on feature film for $10 million. So this guy actually got, like, for an indie film, what amounts to serious backing. But he made it was given enough, money on the credibility of what he'd done on YouTube, to make a $10 million film at the age of 20, which again is also doing like some around the area of 200 million in the box office right now. Absolutely terrific, cool looking movie. Really neat, really interesting. The idea of it is that there's a architect, architect, that's part of the joke. Anyway, there's a guy, a lead actor is, the lead is, basically he's Captain Clark, Captain Clark's Ottoman Empire, where he is a crappy furniture salesman. He's like, just imagine those vast, soulless furniture showrooms you've ever been in. Imagine now the worst one, the one where they don't even ask about easy financing because they know your credit's no good anyway. And so they'll do some kind of deal where, I don't know, you sign off the lease of your car. Just think of the worst furniture store you've ever been in. This guy's running it. And he wanted to be an architect, but he's not living that life anymore. He's divorced from his wife. It sounded like it didn't go particularly well with their whole thing. He's in therapy. Big shocker. Anyway, but he's also sleeping because he's not doing very well financially. He's sleeping in his own store. And so he basically drinks himself to sleep at night. Here's strange, flickering lights. The entire film is done in this horrific fluorescent, soulless warehouse kind of look. And he's sleeping this thing. bitches the electrician, can't you do anything about this thing? The film, I'm not an electrician myself. I don't know much about it. I studied architecture, but I don't know electrical. Can you look at the fuse box? The electrician looks at the fuse box, and there's like a whole other fuse glued onto the fuse box, like at an angle that doesn't seem to turn anything on or off. Everyone's just throwing up their hands, all things, saying, "What the hell? We don't know. It's weird." Anyway, he's in the house in the store one night, and the lights, go off, and in the middle of nowhere, I've had it. Goes down to the fuse box, starts flipping switches. Nothing's working. Nothing's working. Flips the one weird one that was at an angle, and all of a sudden, something lights. The lights go off. But then he also notices a crack of light shining through what appears to be a very narrow hole in the wall. Sticks his fingers up to where that is, and basically falls through into a vast office complex. It's kind of like the one he was in. Like, imagine like just the most soulless office building you've ever looked through. Again, fluorescent fixtures everywhere, odd furniture stacked in various random places. Someone's taken a misprinted stop sign at one point and stuck in the whole thing. And the office complex goes on and on and on, and it seems to have no rhyme or reason. As the guy puts in the film, it's like, imagine if you'd taken someone who'd never seen a dog, like an alien, and you tried to describe a dog to him, and then you had them draw it. That's kind of how the architecture in this place works. And he's wandering through the whole thing until he kind of realizes there's somebody in here or something in here with him, and he gets scared, backs out, but then he goes back and explores again and again, eventually recruits the two hapless people who work in the store with him to go recruiting further, and bad things happen. Really a mind bender of a picture piece. A lot to say about I'm going to say Jungian psychology. If you like that sort of thing, you're going to find a lot to love in this whole thing. It kind of kicks into a whole different gear when the therapist gets a very strange note from Clark on her answering machine after he's disappeared, and she decides to check out his abandoned store, and she winds up in that world, and it's really creepy. It's neat in a really kind of intellectually satisfying way. Definitely worth a look, and that's the one that I decided to check out on. I'm just a little hesitant on that one. I'm going to say that Obsession was if you like horror films at all, is an absolute triumph of an indie horror film. Imagine like a good version of Blair Witch Project, and you have to remember how good Blair Witch Project felt the first time, right? But I mean, like that level of interest for Obsession. Backrooms, it feels really interesting, but I'm gotta admit, this is the part where, just as an old jaded guy, I'm not sure if I trust the writing to the extent I would trust maybe an older, more seasoned writer on that one, because it's very tempting to kind of like, because they don't explain the rules of the place so much to you, and so it's up to you to kind of make up in your head what you think the rules of the environment are, and it's very tempting to get very into, like I say, the Jungian psychology aspect of it, but then you think, or they could have just put that there because it got them out of the hole they were digging themselves away, and they kind of hand waved off, and I don't know, maybe it was that too. So that is a real possibility on that one as well. I do want to give a brief nod out to Spider-Man Noir. That one you don't need to pay any movie money at all to see, as long as you have Amazon Prime. You can see all 8 episodes of it on Amazon Prime. It's just streaming. Spider-Man Noir, holy crap, just great. I mean, really, really good. It's if you've actually read in real time the original issues of Spider-Man around Spider-Man 97, like right around when Gwen Stacy died the first time, you will absolutely understand the tone of this one directly. Nick Cage is great in this one. He's turning into essentially almost like a Bogart Bogart crossed with Nick Cage experience as basically as a retired superhero investigator. You can watch it in black and white or color. Absolutely just terrific. It absolutely is absolutely the way to do an Elseworlds type of piece, because it gives you exactly the feeling of the original comic books, the same kind of morality, the same compelling characters, all that stuff, without being so referential it can't move anywhere. For instance, you've got a character called Cat Hardy, one of the kind of a femme fatale in this one. Clearly a reference to Felicia Hardy, the Black Cat, but they didn't have to go there. You've got great to see, by the way, Robbie Robertson over at the Daily. I was just about to say Daily Planet, Daily Bugle. I'd actually forgotten that character existed. It's J. Jonah Jameson's second in command, the photo editor, the guy that Peter Parker had to sell his photos to. Here, they'd actually done a bit of a swap where he was actually the photographer and not Peter. Parker is basically, Parker, who he's not Parker in this one, is Ben Reilly. But the Spider character is instead of being a guy peddling photos to the guy, he's a gumshoe. Yeah, see, and it's actually Robbie Robertson who's the guy trying to get the pictures. So anyway, great stuff. If you like Spider-Man stuff at all, you'll dig it. If you like film noir, you will dig it. It hits the tone bang on. It's everything I look for in genre comic related material, and just terrific stuff. And clearly I need to wake up my machine on that one. So give me a second on that. And let me go full screen here because I'm just babbling at the moment because I won't be able to show you these. Lastly, a few thoughts on Masters of the Universe, which I just got back from. Okay, all right. The short version of the review, if you guys need to push on, if you like Masters of the Universe, there's a lot to like there. And I also know why it's getting stiffed at the box office. So I mean, it's that's the short version. I mean, there's a lot that absolutely doesn't work, and I think the part that doesn't work is it's kind of baked into the genesis of how Masters of the Universe came up with to start with. So for those people who don't know the lore, Masters of the Universe, it goes before that. It goes back to Star Wars of all things. The ultimate Joseph Campbell hero's journey prototype in the modern era was the original Star Wars, which was absolute passion project of George Lucas. He is he believes in that proper Star Wars with every fiber of his soul, and many people will say it was never Star Wars when it wasn't in his possession anymore. When he sold to Disney, that was the end of it. I think if you've seen Grogu, there's a lot to be said for that point of view. But moving on from that part, in 1975, I believe or 70, 77, I believe was the original Star Wars. What's the name? Mattel had famously passed on the option to merch the toys. They thought space fantasy, whatever thing. Oh man, it's gonna be a lot of plastic parts. It's a lot hard to make. Why do we want to do this thing? It's going to be some BS sci-fi property, whatever else. And the license went over to Kenner instead. And Kenner sold $10 trillion worth of toys off this thing. I mean, because when Star Wars became the cultural phenomenon, it became kids couldn't get enough of it. And as it turned out, he also made an entire world full of characters and sets and spaceships and just lightsabers and so much merch that happened on the whole thing. It became the standard for every property that followed. So a guy named, I think his name was Roger Sweet over at Mattel, pitched an idea to Mattel later on. It says, well, okay, we've got this character called Big Jim. Big Jim was kind of a ripoff of G.I. Joe, which was also a ripoff of $6 Million Man. I know this because I desperately, as a kid, wanted a $6 Million Man with the bionic eye. Is for when I was 8 or whenever that was like the thing. And my parents got me a Big Jim instead, and I was like, well, thanks. But anyway, Big Jim was well loved until he was left out by the sandbox one day, and a falling tree in a thunderstorm wound up beheading Big Jim. That's the end of Pete's Big Jim story, by the way. But Paul Hemberger on the same block had the $6 Million Man, which had they had figured out the kung fu grip karate chop action thing, and so that was pretty cool. Anyway, they thought the same guys who had done Big Jim decided, well, we could have we'll take a Big Jim and we'll buff him up. We'll buff the model up a little bit, and we'll make him an all-purpose action type character. We don't know what he's going to be for exactly, but we'll call him, wait for it, He-Man. Yes. And we'll use him for stuff. And then they managed to sell lots of stuff. I mean, I think when they made Skeletor, they finally were onto something. But yes, the whole thing was made entirely so that Mattel could own a license to sell toys, and therein is the whole thing. Star Wars got made, and it sold a lot of toys, but it got made by a guy who really believed in Star Wars. And as a result of people seeing it and falling in love with that world, you had a million kids dressing up in long robes and swinging around things that they would call lightsabers and making beer, beer, beer sounds as they were going, and people freaking fell in love with it. Mattel's The Origin of He-Man is way more sus than that. That being said, it did find a bit of an audience when it went to animated, time. I mean, let's face it, Saturday morning cartoons, we'll watch most anything when we're kids. We did not have 80 different channels back then. If you could get a cartoon made and it was something that, you could watch, on Saturday mornings while you're having your cereal, chances are you'd get an audience there for a while. And it did get an audience. And it was, the kids were a little bit younger than me. I was a little too old by then. But yeah, there's definitely a crowd of folks, but it was based around a toy line, and it was there to sell the toys. Now, to sell the toys, they're buffing up, they have a lot of kind of gimmicky characters. You got to have, again, you got the big boy toy, the He-Man. You got Skeletor, the big scary guy. They've got to have some villain characters you can bop over. You've got to give the hero some friends that he can help fight with him. You got to throw a girl in there at one point. You got to throw a cat in there because, there's people like that. And so you got an assemblage of these things. And by about wave 3 of the toys, they got into some very silly, gimmicky ones because, again, they're there to sell the toys. They got a guy named Mechanic, which it was like an Inspector Gadget ripoff. He had a stretchy neck. You had a character that came around called Fisto because he had a, wait for it, giant fist. Anyway, this was the mid 80s. And the kids who grew up on the stuff, they loved it. It was fun. And so everything old must be, everything new must be old again. Everything old is going to get a remake or 6 or whatever else. And so this brings us to the current day where someone decided, hey, what's a fan property I can buy or that we can work on that has a built-in fan base where we can give it a bold, fresh new look and, throw some modern techniques at it. And have this thing be, be cool, and thus Masters of the Universe happened. And it's kind of there, kind of. I mean, let's talk about the good parts, right? I mean, it does respect the source material. I mean, the source material was deeply corrupt in its origin, but I mean, if you love the characters and you love the silliness that was on the screen as a kid, you will love, seeing that stuff in bigger, larger screens with stuff like that today. I mean, that part's kind of cool. The part where it missed is when you're going to adapt a property like this, you kind of got 2 lanes to choose, right? The first one, and this is the one that George Lucas, and honestly, every comic fan always goes down, is to really, really believe in the source material. I mean, you take this thing seriously. It's like, yes, Peter Parker, it matters to you that he's a nerdy kid who's getting punched around in school and, got spider, the ability to, have the proportional strength of a spider and came up with web fluid shooters and swing around the city. You believe every last bit of this mythology. And when he runs into someone who dresses up like a lizard or as a buzzard, or someone who, who is a mad scientist who makes 8 cybernetic arms or something like that, you sit there and you just believe it. I mean, that's part of the whole thing for you. The problem with He-Man is that they simultaneously want to sell the toys. It's co-produced by Amazon and Mattel. I mean, they're the guys. They are the people. They want to sell some toys at the end of this whole thing. They really want to move those toys. At the same time, they also think this is stupid. I got to wink and nod at this thing because this is dumb. And they kind of get the tone right at the start of it because you have to lay on the whole legend of how the whole He-Man universe comes to be. And he's doing it in the form of, he's telling is a big voiceover, laying out the whole story of Eternia and Prince Adam and, the power sword and everything else. He's laying all this out. And then he flashed back to the current day and he's on a date with some woman who's just going, yeah, I need to get the hell out of here because this person who's really buff is clearly out of his damn mind. And and you kind of get the thing out of the way early. It's like, yeah, okay, it sounds incredible, but then the natural arc of the story is for you then to go and have it happen, and then for it to be incredible. That's where a fan would go with this one. Somehow, the three writers on this project couldn't seem to agree on what the tone was for the movie, and so they did both things. They both treat it very, very seriously. Certain characters are all in on the whole performance and everything, and then they also will make goofy jokes, like they'll just wink at the camera and say, "Yeah, that's stupid, isn't it?" It'd be like, imagine Star Wars if, when they figured out the power of the merchandising, if they had sat there in the Battle of Endor and you'd had, I don't know, Princess Leia said, huh, "You guys look just like teddy bears. Gosh, I'll bet you someone wants to collect a bunch of you guys and take you home." If she had gone to the camera and said that, it would have had the same impact that He-Man does all the time, where it just kind of winks straight at the audience. Says, "Yeah, this is kind of stupid." Ironically, I think the way they got trapped into this one, this is just a theory, really, is they figured out, as part of the Wave 3 toys, they were stuck with a character, one called Fisto, and one, because again, 1984, you show a kid a toy with a giant fist, because the idea, you're Mattel, you want to make things with attachments, so you could put a big spring ejecting fist on there, because they'd figured out how to do that with toys by then. You could put, they had other villains that had different attachments where they could fire projectiles off of their arms and stuff. They figured, okay, I'll have a guy with a shootable fist or something. So yeah, that made perfect sense if you're talking about a toy aimed at an 8-year-old in 1985. You can't have that character in 2026 and not, as they did, make gay jokes. Especially when you have another character there who is a big head and rams himself at things, and then he became Ram Man. So you're talking about ramming a dude and fisting a dude all day long, and then that's suddenly, you're not just making wink wink har har, oh this is hilarious 8-year-old jokes, because 8-year-olds honestly don't make those jokes unless they're really demented. But you're making the adults really uncomfortable and the audience at this point. But the other thing you're doing there is you're undermining the whole belief in the world. I mean, you can't really square those two lines in your head, and so you're like, am I laughing at this one, or am I laughing with this thing, or should I not be laughing and just taking it all in? Like this is an epic battle against good and evil. Now, the funny thing is, they actually gave the comic role in the old series to Skeletor, which is actually kind of ingenious in terms of the writing on the whole thing. Is they made him so he's absolutely undeniably evil. He has no face. His face is a glowing skull. But they also let him have the funny lines while he's being evil. And so he wound up being actually kind of a beloved meme character in the current day. It's actually where you see him as much as anything. And in the movie, they actually treat him exactly right. I thought Jared Leto would be the death of this movie. No, it turns out he was one of like 2 actors in the whole thing that seemed to have grasped their role correctly. And honestly, when they were writing the role, that they wrote him correctly, because yeah, he is the guy to point out that yes, we're doing evil, malevolent things, but I'm also kind of funny. That's where you have your fun, but you do it in character. The problem here is they broke character way too much to do the thing. So the only time the movie really got its act together to be marching forward as one, really right at the very end, and by then you're kind of like, I don't know what I just saw. So yeah, I get, again, it's not bad. It's not, I mean, I do respect that is people who are fans of the property would see a lot of what they like about the property reflected back on the screen from them. But just as a movie to watch, it's not one that you're going to tell your friends, oh yeah, you got to watch that one. I left feeling like $1 million when I watched the theater, or I left having a lot to think about when I left the theater. No, it's none of those things. It's yeah, that was a thing. It's like, that wasn't a bad thing. I didn't mind it while I was watching it. I could see a lot of good things in it, but the tension between those two, the laughing with parts of the whole thing, it was just too much to square, and so it ultimately left you kind of frustrated. So that would be my review of that one. And then let's see, there's one other comment I want to see. Curry Baker was the Obsession. So many people said they enjoyed Backrooms and Obsession. Spider-Man Noir, terrific, absolutely great. Jetsy says halfway through Spider-Man Noir, not sure if I'll finish it. Yeah, and it's your Your mileage on that one's going to very much depend on how much you like. It's really a particular period of Spider-Man comics. It's like you had to kind of like those ones where like the city was a character. And also I think just that whole interplay between, reporters and photographers and the boxes and, the people, because like back in that era, you actually could have villains like the Kingpin or Man Mountain Marco, because like, kind of like organized crime was a compelling character in the age. And so the idea is like, okay, we'll just take the same kind of plot line, move it backward 20 years and let Nicolas Cage, be a gumshoe during that one, but also give him a spider superhero past. It winds up being a terrific thing to do. But yeah, it's a specialized audience, but not as special as the people that I think Master of the Universe is looking for. Master of the Universe is looking for a combination of 8 to 12-year-old boys, people who were 8 to 12-year-old boys, and people who were simultaneously have daddy issues they're trying to work out. That was a big thing that was playing through the entire thing. Yes, daddy issues, that was one. Aging issues / disappointing your children issues, that was another big thing. Trying to grow up and become the person that you were trying to be. Any of these themes could have been worked in small doses had you played the original thing straight. But the problem is they were trying to both do the wink and the nod thing and work in the heavy stuff and do the fantastical stuff. One of those things had to go. If I got put in charge of redoing the entire thing, just like you have critical drinker fixes, if you had Pete fixes, I would have decided that I did not need a couple of late stage minor supporting toys. And that would have let me not make, gay jokes, which then would have let me embrace the whole Eternia in its fullness and let it be what it is. And having embraced that, then you actually could have had a conventional hero's journey, as well as touching on deeper themes of things like, being disappointed with things as you grow up and the troubles of growing old. You could have touched on those perfect will, but you have to start by embracing the core concept of the world you're in. And here they just I think they walked up to, well, okay, we have a character called Fisto. They want to see it in the movie. What do we do with it, boys? And I think they walked out and said, well, we could get all meta. And I think that's the decision that Deep Six the film. I'm that's as best as I can guess as to where it went wrong in the Red Room, because it's not incompetently written, it's not incompetently acted, it's not incompetently shot. There is rather a lot of volume. If you guys know the kind of like the lit LED green screen type effect, that if you ever see it with the Mandalorian, it's like once you kind of see it in the shot, you can't not see it. And unfortunately the net effect is, while it made it possible to have some very great looking action scenes in the moment, amazing camera work and things like that, that'd be very difficult to do other ways, practically. There's something about it, just when you see it in your head starts recognizing, oh yeah, I'm watching a guy in front of a volume. You can't, it's like watching rear projection. As soon as you knew how that worked in old movies, you can't not see the characters with a film projector playing behind them. You stop seeing them driving down a street. It's just, and volume is getting the same way, where unless you're very careful about how you do it, and that's something I think that took a lot of the oomph out of the action scenes, even though they were certainly loud enough at the theater I was at. You see this on like a 70, 80 foot wide screen. It's pretty, it's a lot of visual stuff going on there, but it didn't have any weight to it. It didn't have any stakes. And I think, especially because you sold out the stakes by selling out the idea that these are anything but, puppets essentially on stage. Suddenly, someone gets killed, you're like, yeah, whatever. They'll patch them up, they'll be back, whatever. It doesn't matter. So that's a thing. All right, let's see here. It's someone else says, yeah, I have daddy issues. So anyway, that is my review column for this week. I think that will do it for me for today. Thank you so much for everyone for stuck around for this one, and I will see you all on the next one. You guys have a terrific summer, and I will probably see more movies, but probably not talk about them next week. Tell you later. Bye-bye.